Well, good evening, everybody, and welcome to our author event. We are so excited to have with us this evening Claire G Coleman and Rhianna Patrick. First of all, I would like to acknowledge the traditional custodians of the land on which we are all meeting. I am on Wiradjuri country. I pay respect to Aboriginal elders past, present and emerging, and extend that respect to other First Nations people. And I celebrate the diversity of Aboriginal culture and language across Australia. This is really, really exciting. I have loved this book, and so I am so looking forward to hearing all about it this evening. So I would like to introduce Torres Strait Islander journalist and broadcaster Rhianna Patrick, who will be in conversation with Claire G Coleman.
Thanks so much, Amy. I'd just like to acknowledge the lands on which I join you virtually tonight on, the lands of the Jagera, Yuggera and Yuggera peoples of what is now known as the Ipswich region of southeast Queensland. I wish to pay my respects to their elders past and present, and also acknowledge any other Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islanders who are joining us this evening. And look, as a Torres Strait Islander, I also acknowledge that I too am a visitor here and that I live and work on country which is not my own and which I have no bloodline to. This week I was struck by a video of a lone Black man with a sledgehammer in the Bahamas who climbed the memorial statue of Christopher Columbus in front of the official residence of the Governor-General's House of the Bahamas. And I only mention this because I feel that it's exactly what Claire Coleman is trying to do in her new book, Lies, Damned Lies. And she's slowly chipping away like he was at that statue with her sledgehammer to reveal the history of this place that we call home and the history that we should all know. And I'm always in awe of Claire's writing and the way that she starts talking about something that seemingly seems unrelated, but which she weaves together to make her point. And this book has fascinated me, it's intrigued me, it's made me angry in parts. I've learnt parts of history that I didn't know, but at times too, I have found myself laughing out loud at different sections of this book. In a good way, Claire, don't panic. But Claire, I feel like where you write your books is always a part of the story as well. And where were you when you were thinking about Lies, Damned Lies?
Well, first, I'd like to acknowledge that I'm on the unceded lands of the Kaurna people in the place now known as Adelaide Plains, at the back of the Gallery of South Australia, through a very complicated mess up in my overbooking myself, which happens all the time. But yeah, I write all over the place, and a lot bits of Lies, Damned Lies were from existing works that were written all over the place. Some of them were written while in a hurry, some were written in hotel rooms while touring. Some of it was edited in this very gallery because it's a piece was written for this gallery that will end up in the book. So they're from all over the place. But most of that book, all the bits are tied all together, and big chunks of it were actually written in lockdown in Melbourne, which is in my house in the Yarra Valley, where I rent. So that's kind of a bit of an different experience for me because although I don't talk about this kind of lockdown idea much, it's very much a part of the experience of the book. So it was kind of a weird experience.
One of those things that I found, Claire, just talking to other parts of the Indigenous community, particularly those that have been in lockdown, just what the pandemic has meant. And I think some of the things that I've found is that there's a lot of thinking going on in community and a lot of stories being shared too that might not have been previously shared because the experience of lockdown and the experience of the pandemic has, I guess, triggered some things, particularly some of our old people and what they went through living under the Act. It's brought up memories, it's brought up stories around that. And so, for you, did you find that with what was happening around you that was probably quite different to how you've written in the past? How much do you think that fed into the things that we read in this novel?
Well, one of the things that jumped out at me was the common reaction by mob to this. People talking about feeling like they've been locked up during COVID, thinking, well, actually, we are locked up at a much higher rate than average Australians anyway, and we've survived in the colonial apocalypse. So whatever white Australia is going through as part of this pandemic, it's a bit small compared to what we've gone through for 240 something years. And you feel like sometimes just feel like grabbing people who complain and strengthening them and telling you've really got nothing to complain about. What, like Melbourne's had 200 something days of lockdown, sucks us, right? But people having been enslaved on their own ancestral country sucks us a lot more. So I just thought this. And of course, you can't really say, oh, you think you've suffered, we've had it worse. That's kind of unfair. But you really want people to you really want people to think about the fact that things are not that bad. We're in lockdown to stop us all dying from a global pandemic. And that, by some standards, that's not so bad.
Claire, you include a lot of your own family history in this story, and there are some personal stories from yourself in there and things that you've thought about during your time, parts of your identity that you didn't know, parts of going to country and, feeling that bloodline and having the ability to be able to have that bloodline under your feet again. And I mean, why did you want to include your own family story as part of this?
One of the a couple of things that go on in my life is there's kind of as a relatively pale-skinned Aboriginal person, I'm not really pale, but I'm relatively pale by some standards. There's a lot that goes on in my life. There goes that list again. There's a lot goes on in my life that people might kind of don't know who I am or where I came from, and there's been some misunderstanding of how identity works for a mixed race, relatively pale-skinned Aboriginal person. And including my family history, it kind of gives a bit of an idea of the rich tapestry of experience that being Black in Australia can mean. We're not all the same. We haven't had all the same family experiences. Not every family has had people stolen, though most have. It's actually rare for families to not have any stolen generation history at all. It's really rare. My family has no stolen generation history, but it's extremely rare for that to happen. And I think it's necessary to talk about these experiences so that people know that how broad our experience is. And I'm not privileged by any means. I'm still Aboriginal. I'm working class. My family have gone through a lot of bad stuff, but being a professional storyteller, being on my third book, I have a relative amount of privilege when it regards the right to tell my story. And I believe if I have that privilege of being a paid storyteller, I believe I should use that responsibility. I should use that responsibility to help people. And one way I can help people is to demonstrate that our experiences are more complicated. They are. There's more going on in Aboriginal Australia. There's more going on in our experience of ourselves. Then I suppose people who don't know our histories will give us credit for. So by exposing my own history, it adds a little bit more to this idea of how complex we are.
Was it also your way, because you talk a little bit about this in your book, about humanising Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islanders as well, humanising our history, humanising our experiences. And I guess, when you were looking at that, of how you get a non-Indigenous person to understand what it is that you're talking about particularly around colonisation, particularly about how that ongoing effect of colonisation is still playing out even today. And you dissect a lot of that. Was it important for you that readers come away, particularly if they're not Aboriginal or Torres Strait Islander, having a better understanding of what it is that Indigenous people have gone through? And, you bring up some of those terms that get thrown around quite a lot, particularly in January, about history and getting over it, as it were.
Yeah. It is about humanising. And for 3 books now, 2 novels and now a non-fiction book, I've attempted to humanise our stories, because it's kind of, in a way, it comes out of the gay rights movement of the 70s and 80s, there was this kind of belief in the gay rights movement. I remember back then, there was a belief that if everyone, I don't know if that's louder than me, that didgeridoo, but feel loud. There's a belief that if everyone had a experience of knowing somebody from a minority group, they find it harder to hate that group. And I think that's kind of part of it. Is that really loud for you?
I think it was telling that it started when it started in terms of what you're talking about as well.
Apologies for the noise, anyone in the audience. I've double booked myself, so I'm at the back of a gallery during an exhibition opening. So, because I'm supposed to be covering it for the media, and I'm in here instead talking to you. So, and that's a very loud introduction.
But you know what? I think it goes perfectly with this conversation because, again, you're in an institution and you've got blackness happening just outside your door, Claire.
And it's entirely possible that electric fields will be even louder because they're playing at this opening as well.
Oh, fantastic. We're just getting the creme de la creme of the Indigenous music world tonight on top of you. But Claire, you've broken this book up into 3 sort of main parts as well as the chapters that fall into each of these parts. And you've got Bones, you've got the colony, and you've also got Prepare for the End. What are you exploring as part of these 3 parts, which, kind of cover the book?
Well, Bones is about getting to the bones of colonisation, getting deep into it so we can understand what it's about and understand because we can't do anything about colonisation if we don't understand it. And the original idea was to look at past, present, and future. But I thought going into the bones of history, what the colony is, because we're still a colony, and then the future, which is of course the end of the colony. We need to imagine the colony ending. So that's why I divide up in those 3 chapters. I like the idea of looking at it from my Bones also about my family past, about the idea of who my family are, and the story that is in my bones, the story that's in your bones. There's a story for every Aboriginal person. There's a story in our bones, and there's a story in the bones of country. And our families, I always say that, lately I've been saying that if people want to know what country is, one of the easy ways to answer it is country is where the bones of our ancestors are buried. And where, if you go back tens of thousands of years, that's where the bones are. And the bones of the ancestors of the colonizer are in Europe. So, there's a limit to how far back the bones go. Someone just opened the door. There's a limit to how far back into history the bones can go before most people have no connection. So if you think about the idea of bones, I use bones as a pretty strong metaphor for who belongs where. And that's to me, that's why that chapter's called that. And of course, the colony is where we are now. We are in the colony, and we are still in the colony. And the colony is not the past. The colony is our living present. So that's really important to remember. And of course, prepare for the end. I want you all to be prepared for the end of the colony, because it'll end one way or the other. And it's settler colonialism. So the way that settler colonialism ends is either by extinction of the first people or by someone stopping the process. And we haven't either of those yet. And we don't want the extinction of the first people, so the colony wants that. What we want is to bring it to an end and have a society, maybe a society where we can all belong. Because we can't Charlie Bergen said it, it's too late to get rid of all the white people because they've been here generations now. But we can get rid of the colonial thinking. I hope we can. Some people say it's impossible, but I hope we can.
It also seems to me that you're exploring, in a way, Indigenous futurism too in this. It's not only that connection to your past, the connection to your budja, as you write about, and what that means in Noongar culture from Western Australia and where you're from, but also that you are talking about this future. What does that future look like with colonisation ending, with the end of this process that has been happening?
Yeah, I mean, connection to country is one of the things that defines Indigenous cultures all around the world. Every Indigenous culture, even First Asian American people talk about what defines them is their connection to their country. And I suppose one way to imagine the ending of the colony is for non-Indigenous people to learn that connection to country. And because, and maybe, like, it's like Pauline Hanson once said that she's Indigenous because she was born here. And of course, by the definition of Indigenous, someone who's merely born here can't be considered Indigenous. But you could say that, someone opened the door again. You could say that that people who kind of are colonized from colonizer stock, whose ancestral country is back in Europe, can become part of this country, and it will take generations of cultural change. But I think that's what Yothu Yindi meant with the line from the treaty of dreaming of a dark, brighter day when our waters will be one. I don't think they wanted us to become white. I think they wanted white Australia to become us, or to join us and become. And I always joke that I consider my job is to assimilate white people.
Or it's about getting to know us, I suppose, more than they have, or an understanding us more than they probably have thought about in a way too.
And understanding themselves.
I did read something recently, Claire, which I found quite interesting, and I wanted to get your take on this. That someone was talking about listening, the importance of listening, and that non-Indigenous people, it's not just about listening, but it's about understanding what you're listening to, and having this conversation about that deep listening and taking the time to just think about it before making a comment or before coming to a conclusion.
And I think the concept of listening is proper listening requires trying to understand the context in which someone's speaking. It's like language isn't just a language. It's not just we have to speak the same language. We have to be speaking from staying in the same ground. It's no good. Like people say that when the colonizers first got to Melbourne, they had the wrong idea of what the idea of a treaty was, or what the idea of entering the land is. They believe that being welcomed to land meant the right to take the land, whereas the First Nation people often say that no, they were invited to come visit. And the first time I came to this art gallery, there was an exhibition opening, in which an elder said that the problem was that when the white people came, no one imagined that they would want to stay forever. Everyone thought that they eventually want to go home. So if you don't have the same context, it doesn't matter what your understanding is. If your socio-political context is completely alien, your discussions you'll never meet in the same way. So deep listening involves understanding what someone has to say before understanding someone's personal point of view before you even try and listen.
Claire, we have a mutual love of all things nerdy, particularly Doctor Who. And I what I love about the way that you explore colonisation in this book is all from different angles, from different perspectives. And you have a chapter called I Monster, which I really loved. And I wanted to know about those references, like where that reference comes from, and if it was the Robert Louis Stephens reference to the movie that was made from his novella, or if it was something greater, because I think you crammed so much into that chapter.
Well, that chapter was driven conceptually by the idea that we are that when you look really at the Gothic horror and you look at a lot of science fiction, the monster is coded as a black woman. And my favourite example is the fact that in the Alien movies, the xenomorph is they're all female, and they're all, of course, they're all like carbon fibre black, made out of gaffer tape and carbon fibre. So from that point of view, they're obviously a black woman. And funnily enough, that essay was built from one that I wrote for an exhibition catalogue for this gallery. And the person who commissioned it just walked past behind me.
Well, so there you have it. There's a lot of timing happening here right now.
So yeah, the idea was that I looked at monsters, and you find out that so many of them are black women. And the idea I Monster, it's kind of a reference in a way to Douglas Lockwood's I Aboriginal.
Right. Okay. Got you. Yes.
In a way, the idea that we don't tend to put ourselves in the person of the monster, and in a way, we are put in the person of the monster. Like we have been put in the person of the monster, so therefore we don't have any choice in whether or not we're the monster. So it's and of course the theme of the exhibition, which was the Adelaide Biennial of Art in the Art Gallery of South Australia, which is through that door. The theme was monsters, and I was asked to just write something that riffed on the theme of monster. And I thought, well, I've always been interested in the fact that to me, all the monsters are women. So it's sort of...
Yeah, see, and this is the thing. After I read that, I was like, of course they are. This makes perfect sense to me, what you're saying about the xenomorphs in Alien. You have a bit of Night of the Living Dead thrown in there. You talk a lot about zombies. You've got vampires, you've got Norman Bates. But the way that you bring that all together, I was fascinated with where you were heading with that conversation, because it's a conversation about feminism in a way. Mm-hmm. It's a conversation about Black women in a way too, but also this bigger conversation about being Indigenous and the effect of colonisation. And so I guess, is this where your happiness lies, Claire, is when you get to be able to bring those examples and to bring your love of speculative fiction, of sci-fi into this realm and present something to people in a way that they hadn't thought it could ever be presented or discussed.
My idea of fun is finding a bunch of connections that make no sense at all to anyone else, that to me make perfect sense, and then make them make sense to everybody else. The classic thing I do is, we were talking about Doctor Who before. I'm working on a project with someone, and every time they go, we need a visual reference. And I said, well, there's a Doctor Who episode which has the perfect reference. And then I'll find the one episode, I tell them. And of course, it is always the perfect visual reference, because as you know, Doctor Who has everything.
Can't have a Claire Coleman book without a Doctor Who reference in it, which is where I went with the I Monster. I was like, okay, maybe that is after that novella, but that movie actually does have Peter Cushing in it, who at one time was Doctor Who. Like, I went down this rabbit hole. I'm so sorry.
I like Peter Cushing.
But I love the way that you brought that all back together and you tied it back together. So it seemingly feels like you're off on this tangent and you don't know where you're going as a reader. But I think that's part of the excitement that you create. And, if we're on this dystopian, apocalyptic sort of conversation, you write in this book, we don't have to imagine a dystopia, we live in one day after day. And I love the theory that you come up in this, which is around, can you tell me how the apocalypse relates to colonisation?
Well, it's actually interesting because there's certain thematics around the concept of apocalyptic fiction. Of course, apocalyptic fiction has been all around for a long time, but the quintessential modern piece of apocalyptic fiction is War of the Worlds. We know that. Like, that is the one. That's the alien invasion. It's the first alien invasion apocalypse ever written. And that was actually written as an analogy for the invasion of Australia by the British. So it's like, if I'd say this often to people, like some people grab and go, yeah, you're right, and one with other people looking like I'm mad. I always say that Australia is the spiritual home of modern science fiction, because the first modern science fiction novel was written to explain Australia. So the apocalyptic genre is the apocalyptic fiction genre. The alien invasion trope is about us. It's about Indigenous Australians. So I think we should own it. I think you should take possession of this thing that was always about us. And to help with what other people think, it's ours, damn it.
Oh, I'm just looking forward to seeing every Indigenous person I know who then reads this book and then starts talking about that and spreading the message. And and that's the only thing that I see, because I think it's probably little known that that's where the inspiration for that came from.
And it wasn't really hidden. It was in the introduction to the first edition, and for several editions after. I don't know if it still is, but but for the first, God knows how many editions, that was always in the introduction. So it's not, and of course I watched a documentary on apocalyptic science fiction the other day, and that mentioned it as well. So everyone kind of knows it, but everyone doesn't know it. And I suppose in a way that fits well with the theme of Lies and Lies, because Lies and Lies is about the not known but not hidden truths. Because there's things that in my book that I mentioned, and people go, "That's really?" You go, "Yeah, it's kind of not a secret." It's like it's there.
Well,
and
as you say, it's in the literature. It's where you found this information, and it's there for everybody to see. It's not hidden. It's not, it's not concealed. It's actually in front of our very eyes, and we just need to find it if we go looking for it.
All of it is, yeah. So much stuff is right in our eyes. The truth about what Cook was really like is right there. It's no secret. He wasn't some hero. He was just a dude, and not a very nice dude at that.
I'm looking forward to someone just saying he was a dude. Colonization, you talk about colonization and about it not being a process and not an event. And what does non-Indigenous Australia, I guess, need to understand about this history? So if we go back to when I talked about what we hear a lot in January about being told to get over our history, it was in the past, it's not. What have you said to that has countered that argument in this book?
Sure. Well, the idea that colonisation is a process, it is a process. The act of colonisation has a beginning, and settler colonialism particularly, what Australia is, it's a settler colony. It starts somewhere, sometime, and it ends sometime, in a way, ends with the extinction of Indigenous people. That's how settler colonialism ends. Either extinction of the people or of our culture has to occur for settler colonialism to win. And it's a process because it's not. People think of the colony happened in 1788. January 26, 1788, colonisation began in England. It didn't. It started January 26, 1788, and it's still going now. And so that process is what we have to think of. That's what colonisation is. I can hear Zachariah Fielding in the background.
Which means electric fields has now started.
Electric fields has started.
But, if we look at that, and you were saying, that history is quite recent, and what we mean by that recent history, which you outline in your book, which is that people are forgetting that this is a 1984/1986 recent history. Yes,
right. There's debate over whether the last Aboriginal people to leave the bush and meet white people was either 1984 or 1986. There was one group, 1984, confirmed they'd never seen white people. There's another group, 1996, that may have seen white people and then gone back to the bush. They can't be sure. So it's either 1984 or 1986 when colonisation ended, when the last people were colonised in 1986. But the first lands returned was the late 60s. So in a way, this process of decolonising the continent and the process of colonising the continent overlapped. So, in a way, the process of colonisation never really got a chance to finish, and now it won't. We can't. I don't really think the process can finish. It's impossible now, unless we get a rise of extremist fascism or something like a complete change of governmental ways. But unless that happens, there's absolutely no way for the process of settler colonialism to complete. So we're stuck in this non-space, this process of being during a colonisation that, unless it is stopped by the process stopping, or unless it's stopped by people no longer trying to colonise this continent, as in by police, like Aboriginal deaths in custody stopping, murdered by police stopping, over-incarceration stopping, all those things. Let's all those things stop. We're going to be stuck in this partially colonized state, this active violent colony forever, because it's not going to end and it's not going to stop. So I don't think people realize that we're going to be stuck in this half state, this active colonization for centuries unless somebody actively stops it.
It's a weird state to be in, still being colonized but decolonizing at the same time.
Yeah, I know. It's really strange. And we're not, if we're trying to decolonize, we're not succeeding. You know, as a nation, the classic one I say, so people always say to me that Australia is not a colony. And I say, I've got one easy statement to make that will prove that Australia is a colony. A colony is settler colonialism is slightly different, but a colony in general is a place ruled by the leader of another country. Right? That's actually the definition of a colony. And we are still ruled by the Queen of England. So even if you ignore that it's settler colonialism, even if you look at the simplest meaning of the word colony, we are ruled by the Queen of England, so we are a colony. We are still, by legal definition, a colony of Great Britain. And there's an argument, of course, logically, that even becoming a republic and kicking out the Queen won't stop us being a colony of Great Britain, because there's other being colonial. And that comes down to the process of settler colonialism. But even in the simplest terms, we cannot be a colony while a foreign leader rules us. And so that's one way, that's one simple bit of proof that Australia is peri-colonial, in the middle of being a colony.
You talk a little bit about what it's like as an Indigenous author, writer, to put your work out there, and then what comes back when you're writing about Indigenous topics, subjects, the experiences that you're going through, the experiences that your family have gone through. And I mean, what do you hope that non-Indigenous people understand what it's like when you put something out into the world, and what you're experiencing by telling your truth, by doing this work?
Well, the minute I bring out a piece of work that I know is going to basically be sticking a pin into the colonizer, irritating them, I know that I'm going to suffer big, nasty spikes of racism. I know that's going to happen. And that's because the colony doesn't like to be told about itself. They don't want to know what sort of country this actually is. So you point it out, and people get really angry. So I know I'm going to get attacked. I know I'm going to get trolled online. I know I'm going to cop abuse and death threats. I know that I'm going to have nasty articles written about me by somebody, sometimes in Quadrant. I haven't yet caught one nasty one in the Herald Sun yet, but it's only a matter of time. I've caught nasty ones in Quadrant and in Spectator. You know that it's going to happen. It happens to all of us, and it's really hard. But on the other hand, to not speak up is in a way harder, because I'm good at speaking up, and I kind of speak up so that other people, not so that I don't have to, but so that our voice can be heard. And you do the same thing as a broadcaster. You speak up so our voices will be heard. And they don't like it, but it's what we do what we have to do, and we do what we do. We do our job. And our job is to be a thorn in the side of the colonizer, because for them to win colonisation, our voices have to be silenced. And I can't remember if this is in the book or it's something else I wrote once. But I said all Indigenous people have to do to win a genocide is not die.
And it's in the book. You talk about that. I'm pretty sure you talk about that when you're talking about the resilience of Black women and the importance of Black women, and by living, we are already bucking the trend in a way.
Absolutely. And see, genocide requires our extermination. That's what it means. And to survive is to win that war. And it's always been, I think, a lot of the time, in almost all cases in history, winning a war for women is simply a case of surviving and having children. That's all. And that sometimes is the only opportunity we have to fight the war, is to survive. And so, and of course, to speak up is really not just to survive the genocide, but it's almost waving the "we survived" in their face when we speak up. Which is probably why they don't like us talking up, because we're supposed to not be here anymore. For them to have succeeded at colonisation, we have to have not been here anymore, and we are still here, and that is actually a failure of the system in Australia. It's a failure of 240 years of attempted extermination. The fact that we are still here means they lose, and no one wants that. No one wants to lose. So that's part of why there's so much anger whenever we speak.
I'm aware that we're going to go to questions very soon. So if you do have a question for Claire, drop it into the chat box so that I can ask it on your behalf. And also, can you put where you're listening in from as well? Because it would be great to know where everyone is. Claire, I guess, if there was one thing that you wanted readers to take away from Lies, Damned Lies, what would it be?
I think I want people to start with the understanding that Australia's history is built on a foundation of bullshit. And once you start realising that even the foundational mythology of the start of this colony is wrong, and then people start to question what they've learned. I think you got to the classic one, the classic foundational crookedness in our heads is, I know this is in the book, pointing out that the Education Minister in 2018 said that January 26 should be celebrated because it's the day that Captain Cook came ashore in Sydney Cove in the First Fleet. And Captain Cook had already been dead for 9 years. And if people don't know this, if you ever wanted a reason that you want to have to celebrate day, I celebrate Cook got cooked day. Because on Valentine's Day in 1779, Captain Cook, Lieutenant Cook, tried to, actually I think it was a captain with him. Anyway, Captain Cook attempted to kidnap the Hawaiian king and was speared and then strangled in the surf, and then the meat cooked off his bones because bones are going to be kept as a relic. And so on Valentine's Day, Cook got cooked.
Not alone in celebrating or commemorating that, whichever side of that is, Claire. It is becoming actually quite popular, I think, amongst Indigenous communities where he went.
Hawaiians do it. They do. They call it Cook Day or whatever they call it.
If you do have a question, don't forget to pop it into the box. We have a question from Stevie, Claire, who is in Victoria and says, do you think your book and Indigenous futurist literature in general has transformative and healing functions?
I think it does, but maybe not in the way that most people would imagine healing is. I think before you can heal, the first step is to look for the truth. Right? Think about the idea of healing the nation. Before we can heal the people of this continent, we have to know what the people of this continent is. You can't heal a sickness if you don't know what the sickness is. And I think truth is transformative in healing. I don't like I like reading it, but I'm never going to be the sort of person to write book with a kind of a happy transformation at the core. I'm going to write a book where the core of my writing is hitting people over the head with the truth. But I think that's healing. In South Africa, when they ended apartheid, they had what they called the Truth and Reconciliation Commission, and because they understood that you couldn't have reconciliation, you couldn't have this idea of the peace and of people becoming the same people without telling the truth first. So before you can heal, you have to face the truth. So in that way, my work is healing, in facing the truth.
Hey, what do you think the obsession is with Cook? Why Cook?
I think Cook, there's for some reason a bit of I think it's a socio-political myth that in a way the doctrine of discovery gives someone more right to colonize land than invasion or settlement or the annexing laws of the time. In reality, Australia did. In reality, the reason the British set up a colony in Sydney Cove is sure there was to put convicts, but there was also the fact that by European law at the time, you didn't really claim somewhere until you put a building on it, really. And it doesn't matter, you could name it and claim it, which Cook did for Sydney. Well, so the theory goes anyway. He named it, certainly. But in reality, it was actually the act of landing on Australia, the act of when the genocide began, that the nation began. I think people think that Cook's discovery, so-called discovery of Australia, is a cleaner narrative on which to build a mythology for the country. And I think, and also, although terra nullius was overturned by the Mabo decision, the idea that Australia was empty, we have yet to overturn the terra nullius in people's head. People still believe that Australia was empty. The classic one is that this cognitive dissonance we talk about all the time, which is white Australians can say Aboriginal people have been here 60,000 years and we were here first, like white people were here first, in the same breath, and not see a cognitive dissonance. So I think Cook, in a way, gives them a way around that cognitive dissonance, because when they imagine Cook discovering Australia, they imagine us not being here.
One of the things that I found quite interesting, Claire, is obviously, you go deep into history, you find, it's how you build your arguments in this book of really bringing out, as you say, the things that are in front of us that we can find quite easily. But I wanted to know, what is it about history for you? What is that attraction to history?
I don't think I'm attracted to history in its own right. I think if I was asked to describe what I'm about in my creative work, I don't think history would actually be anywhere on it. I think I'm interested in truth. And if you're trying to find the truth of a colony like Australia, you find it in the history. And you find it in the primary sources. You don't go to the existing history books because, as we know, history is biased. So if we go to the existing history books, it doesn't actually give us any truth. You have to go to the primary sources, and of course, that means you have to kind of understand how history is done. But you don't really need to know history to be doing history for itself. So yeah, it's history is kind of not my favourite topic, really, but not really. But I think Aboriginal. I think it's I feel an obligation to dig into the truth for our people, and to do that, I need to dig into the history.
Yeah, and that's so interesting. Amy actually has a question. and she'd like to know what you're currently working on and what you like to read yourself.
Good question.
Not a book that's labelled history. It has to be labelled truth-telling.
I'm working on my third novel. Well, it's in edits. The drafts are finished, and we're editing my third novel, which is due out next year. It was due out this year, but everything's like a mess. Our lives are a mess. So it was due out. It was due out by now. My third novel, and now it's going to be next year. I'm working on that. I'm working on a play that I've commissioned, and a large public art project based in Melbourne. So I've got some big things going on, including another book. So another speculative fiction book, really pleased to know.
Look, you know how much I love trying to dig out the references in anything that you write. I'm all about that. I guess, I'm aware that if you do have a question, by the way, please pop it into the chat box. If you have a comment for Claire as well, please feel free to drop it in there too. Amy will put all of those together and pass them on to Claire as well, so that she can also see what you've just commented on and what your thoughts have been. And I guess, maybe we should... I guess I still have more questions that I can wait, because I would like to give people time just to have a bit of a think if they have any questions to ask you, Claire, because I think this is a great opportunity to be able to do that. I'm intrigued by this idea that you had about why you don't believe that the end of colonisation will happen in your lifetime.
Yeah.
Can you just explain that a little bit more?
Well, I'm 47. There's many reasons why I don't believe end of colonisation happened in my lifetime. And one of them is because I'm 47. And we're really only properly starting to discuss Australia as a settler colony now. It's actually kind of I think we're in the crest of the wave of discussing this now. I've got my new book out. Chelsea Ortega's got a book out with a similar topic next month, and there's a lot of people to talk about this stuff. And there's I've heard of a lot of conversations around this idea of what is the colony and how to decolonize. But I think it will take generational change for colonisation as we know it to end, and we need people now to teach their kids to stop being colonial, and then they have to teach their kids. And once we've got a generation of young people who are kind of who grow up not believing in the colony, I suppose you could say, a whole generation of Australians who aren't colonisers. That is the point at which we may be able to imagine, because the colony is still in our heads and in our language and in our laws. The colony is still there, and you literally need to have people grow up without the colony for dead.
And it's completely embedded, isn't it? As
it
well,
is, it's everything.
Yeah, and when we talk about decolonising, I think that's a really interesting thing, because I feel like sometimes the idea of decolonising isn't completely understood as to what it needs to be. Because if you're still reverting to a way in which you've come to know how you should be, how you should do things, you actually have to break that all down and recognise that when you're doing it, that is the colony at work.
Yeah, and the colony has to decolonise. In order for the colonizer has to decolonize and stop thinking like a colonizer to bring an end to the colony. But I don't think one generation is enough. I think it's the children of the decolonized who can end the colony, not the decolonize themselves.
Yeah, we've got a great question actually that's just come in from Jenny. Thank you, Jenny. She said, this talk is great and I'm looking forward to reading your book. I feel that we need to be blunt and telling it as it is. We are overly polite when talking. Are we overly polite when talking or writing about Indigenous history? Why is this?
I think it depends. Well, the question is, I suppose it depends on who are we, because certainly the colonisers aren't overly polite. They're not polite at all when talking about the history of colonisation. The colonisers are in fact quite bluntly rude when talking about colonisation. But Aboriginal people are certainly too polite. I think that needs to end. I think we need to start being on. I think we need to talk to the colony and tell the colony who they are. And I think we need to stop being polite about it. I mean, nothing will be polite. I'm a firm believer that there's no need to be nasty to anyone ever. And I also don't believe in being hateful. I don't, even if I would not experience feeling hate for even my worst enemy. It just doesn't help me. Also believe that there's no such thing as a bad person, just bad behaviour. And I do believe that in my soul, but we need to stop being polite, because I think that one of the reasons that it takes good people to do bad things. The worst things are done by good people. And I think we need to not be polite to those good people who are doing bad things. And if they're actually really good people, we tell them that what they're doing in the name of goodness is bad. If we're honest about it, and they're really good, then they would actually go, yeah, what, you're right. That is how it is. And I'd like to think that the good people will listen without bias and go, yeah, I should have known that myself, and I should listen more carefully.
It's interesting that you should say that, because the late Uncle Ross Watson from this side of the coast here in Brisbane, big leader, started a lot of Indigenous media on this side of the country, and he used to talk about that he didn't believe that people were inherently bad, that they were good people, but good people do bad things. So it's interesting that you say that, because it's something that I've been thinking about a bit. Colleen has a question, Claire, and she says, what in your opinion is the relationship between colonisation and capitalism?
That's a really good question. That's one that people have been discussing a lot lately, actually. Colonisation is the other side of the coin to capitalism. They're not opposites, they are the same bloody thing. Like colonisation started to exploit the resources of another place. That's what it was always about. The people who encouraged Britain to create a colony in Australia were doing it for economic reasons. And it's like capitalism occurred, colonisation occurred because capitalists were running out of resources from which to build their capital. So I think we can't separate colonisation and capitalism at all. And also the rise of modern capitalism and the rise of colonisation happened at the same time. They fed each other. And it's like people pointing out that colonisation and exploitation go hand in hand. You're exploiting the land, you're exploiting the people. Slavery and colonisation go hand in hand. And of course, slavery and capitalism go hand in hand. It's all the same structure.
Brooke also has a question, but first she says, thank you so much for this discussion and your work. Brooke says she's a secondary history geography teacher from Parramatta. Have you thought of ways to support teachers in teaching this history and stir up decolonialism in society? Also thoughts on the tension of multiculturalism and other minorities wanting to understand and value their cultures and histories as well. And then she says, thanks so much for the book. I'm about to teach the Spanish conquest and already planned the alien metaphor to introduce it.
And you're funny about the alien metaphor. There was a short story, a long short story, a short novella, I can't remember which it is, called Despoilers of the Golden Empire, which someone told me about this after Terminator, and it uses the metaphor of alien invasion to explain the Spanish conquest of the Americas. So it's a common recurring trope. Yeah, look, that was an enormous question.
You need me to pull out the bits again about teaching history and stirring it up?
Well, I think no, it's fine. I think it'd be good. I would even imagine it. I could even create a larger book with more detail. I mean, that's probably. I think my essays in Lies and Lies are good starting points. I think, and many of them have references. I think I don't cover. If there's no way I could be considered to cover the history in its entirety. All I've done is really chucked a hand grenade into the discourse and run away. Or maybe I didn't run away. Chucked a hand grenade and stood in front of it. But the thing is that there's lots of information out there. There's lots of Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander writers who've written amazing stuff on these topics. And I think using my book, any other book by an Indigenous person on the real history of Australia, and then using that to start a longer discourse is, I think, a good way to go, I think.
Claire, I love also that Judith, who is a teacher in Blacktown, has said that she would love to have a conversation with Brooks. So there's already collaborations happening on the chat. We've got a couple more questions to get through, Claire. Sue says, I really found Claire's essay about Indigenous art fantastic. What are the most exciting things happening in the Indigenous art world at the moment? And also, which one is each of your favourite doctors, Sue, living on Yagara country?
There's a lot of one observation I've made about Indigenous art lately. I mean, I'm literally at an exhibition opening right now. A lot of what I've observed about Indigenous art of late is the political art has gone from being a side topic or something that's kind of hidden within the painting to being a bit more in your face. There's a lot of, I interviewed an artist called John Prince Sidden this morning because I've got like a media pass. I interviewed John Prince Sidden this morning, and he said that his painting, which is on the cover of the Tarnity catalogue, is about climate change and about how climate change affects everybody, whether or not they're white people, black people, and even, he said, even refugees and everyone, like no matter where they're from, is affected by climate change. So that's sort of overt. It's like the Aboriginal artists from what people call the bush have been getting more and more sick of their subtle messages being ignored and decided to get out a sledgehammer.
Favourite doctor?
Favourite doctor? Jodie Whittaker or David Tennant.
Oh, see, my heart always belongs to the fourth Doctor, Tom Baker. It's a childhood thing.
I love Tom Baker, but David Tennant or Jodie Whittaker, I think.
If we're talking classic Who, Tom Baker.
Yeah, absolutely. Without question.
If we're talking new Who, I would agree with you. David Tennant's probably up there. And I think Jodie has come in underneath.
I think Jodie's not given enough credit.
Yeah, we need to see more. We need to see more from that doctor. Shirley says, history informs the present. If we dig into historical primary sources, there is usually one source that will contradict another. For example, on one hand, Cook describes meeting Indigenous people, but then the continent was deemed an empty land there for the taking.
Yes. I don't know where to go with that question, but one thing I always say, and I hadn't insisted about this, but I thought I'd check. And I actually did a Google search for what do you do if two primary sources disagree? And it said, work out which one had the most to gain from lying.
Ooh. Ooh. That puts a whole new spin on it, doesn't it?
It does. And when you think about it that way, though, that actually it answers the whole Cook's journals disagreeing with and the history of Australia not agreeing with Cook journals. That puts it in an interesting perspective. It serves the colony to think that Australia was empty, even though Cook never actually said it. In fact, there's evidence to suggest that the whole concept of terra nullius arose not in the time of Cook or the time of the colony, but when at the start of land rights. So as once we started trying to assert our rights, that's when they came up, they started using the doctrine of terra nullius.
Man, okay, I'm going to go into the next question now. Oh, Angela did come back and say David Tennant all the way. Bit of 10th Doctor love right there. Peter says, thank you, Claire. As a white male living in Gadigal country now named Sydney, I'm interested in the importance of First Nations people's use of totems to inform their next generation of cultural attachments to land, sea, etc. I wonder where this understanding is explained in detail. It would be useful to convey First Nations people's culture through these means to young people of all cultures.
The problem with the so-called totems, firstly, it's never spoken about that way. We use the word totem. Aboriginal use the word totem mainly because it's like one of those words like dreamtime that is just come up with to explain something that has no equivalent in European culture. I think we, and the other problem is that a lot of this idea of your family connection is. A lot of that's sacred, which means that you can't really even tell people outside of your family. But on the other hand, there's a concept that was invented, linguistically invented in North America, but it works out as well, which is and it helps kind of understand how to no longer fuck the planet, and that is this idea of non-human relatives. And that's what the concept of a totem normally comes down to in a very simple term. It is a relative that's not a person. And if you've got relatives that aren't people, you defend them and you help them and you save them. You think of the place where you're born as a relative. You think of the animals where you're born as relatives. You're not going to destroy the planet. And that's kind of the simplest way to even think of it. And if you think about the idea of the tree outside your house being a distant relative that's not a human, that kind of get you close to the idea of how Aboriginal people see the world, and will probably give you a good starting point to learn how to not fuck the planet.
And I think it's also one of those things, isn't it, Claire, that I think there's some material that has been written about sort of totems, clanship, kinship, skin for various groups, but I think it's so complex in the different nations, in the different clans, in the different tribes that we have here, that it does vary quite a bit too.
It does.
Yeah, and I think, because Torres Strait Islanders on one side, we have clan, which is, related to village, which is related to island. It's all sort of very interconnected, which is then related to totems that you have. It's just complex. I think that is all our questions. Shirley just wanted to thank both of us for a very interesting talk. And Shirley, thank you. And thank you to everyone who did chuck a question in the chat box for Claire. Claire, it's been an absolute pleasure. And
it's always a pleasure talking to you, Rhianna.
Oh, look, I feel privileged that I've been
You're the best interviewer.
to talk to you about all of your books that you've done so far.
Actually, you launched my first ever book.
I did. We did, didn't we? At Brisbane Writers Festival,
right.
which is where you found out.
Beginning.
Which is where you found out that had gone into the second print, and you were only there talking about the first print.
I know. And so you've been there from the beginning.
Which I feel privileged to. So thank you so much. And I would say, for those of you who have joined us online, make sure you pick yourself up a copy of Lies, Damned Lies. And I want to say big thank you to you, Claire. I know that was hard, having everything happening outside the door, but you've been a trooper.
It was hilarious.
And I did bet you before we started that elevator door was going to open, and it did.
Oh, no, multiple times.
But I thank those that stuck it through with us. And I just want to say Essa, which is thank you for joining us, and Debeki, which is good night as well. So thank you so much for joining us both.
Thanks, everyone. See you later.